Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2022 Chevy Colorado, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster battery charge line kit for towed vehicles. But before we do that, why don't we check this out and kind of talk about why it's a good idea to use a kit like this. When it comes to a battery charge line kit, it's one of those things that aren't absolutely necessary, but definitely something that you want to have. And you know, I say that because what happens whenever you're flat towing your Colorado, you're going to have a supplemental braking system, right? Something that's going to apply the brakes in your truck whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. And what will happen is the majority of the time, those systems they get power from your Colorado's battery. So when you're towing, you know, that braking system activates and activates and activates, and it's going to slowly but surely rob some juice from your battery. Well, when you do that for 8 or 10 hours, you know, it adds up, and so you get to where you're going, exhausted, ready to disconnect and, you know, start to kick back. Come to find out the truck's battery's dead, and then you're dealing with, you know, hooking up a jump start to it, or a jump box, a charger, whatever the case may be, right? You don't want to mess with it. That's where a component like the charge line kit is going to come into play. It's really simple, but it's a game changer, really, because the way this is going to work is it's going to use power from your motorhome's charging system. It's going to take a little bit of that power and essentially trickle charge or maintain your Colorado's battery. That way, whenever your braking system uses some juice, it's going to be replenished essentially right away from the charge line, and so it evens itself out. That way, you're going to have the confidence knowing, you know, when you get to where you're going and you want to unhook, you're going to be able to turn the key, the truck's going to start up, and you can continue on about your day. Something that I do want to address is the battery charge line kit isn't going to affect your motorhome's batteries or affect them at all. It's not going to drain them or whatnot, and that's because the motorhome is going to have its own charging system using via the alternator to generate its extra amperage. So essentially, this is just taking a very small amount of that power and transferring it from the motorhome into your Colorado's battery. So the way it works, it's going to come out of your motorhome 7-way, that 12-volt auxiliary power. And of course, this is going to have to be in working condition for everything to go right. But that power is going to get sent through your cable and through your 6-way up through a breaker. And that circuit breaker is there to protect it from any shorts or anything. If you had some electrical issues going on, trip the breaker. Similar to kind of how it works in your house almost, you know, if you're not familiar with that. But yeah, it's going to send that power up into your battery and keep it charged up. I do want to mention, you need a battery that's in good working order too in order for this to do its job. You can't stuff a battery in here that's old and you know, completely drained anyway, essentially a bad battery, and expect this to bring it back to life or anything like that. This battery has to be in good condition, and as long as it is, and you don't have, you have everything set up properly, this will keep it charged up and good to go. But other than that, at the end of the day, a really simple but super effective component. This is something I recommend for every flat tow that I do, not just the Colorado, any car in general that I set up a flat tow parts on. I always recommend something like this, and especially today's newer cars, there's so many things that are electronically controlled, you know, electronically assisted brakes, electronically assisted steering, and so on and so on. It just makes sense to have your electrical system in good working condition, right, and have the proper amperage and voltage for all that stuff to work properly. But other than that, you know, as far as getting this installed, really not too bad. I kind of mentioned it earlier. There's a wire that we hook up to our 6-way, mount up to our breaker, and from the breaker a wire goes to the battery. So pretty straightforward. Really shouldn't take up a bunch of your time, but speaking of that, why don't we go ahead and get this installed together now. To begin our installation for our charge line, we're going to be here at the front of the truck, and obviously I have the front fascia removed and everything else, and that's because I'm doing this at the same time that we're doing our base plate. But this can be done with the fascia and everything on, just don't have as much space. But what I suggest doing is, if you're installing all this stuff, if you have diode wiring, go ahead and do this at the same time as the charge line. It just makes it a little bit easier, saves you some time. But you're going to take one end of the charge line and run it through your mounting point here, and we're going to strip back the insulation. Take that, peel it back, and give it a good twist. So then what you can do is I went ahead and took our rubber dust cover, put that over our wires, and to get the charge line hooked up, you're going to go to the center pin here on our 6-way. You can back out that set screw a little ways, take the charge line, and you're just going to place it into the terminal. Hold that down and simply tighten up the set screw. With our wiring hooked up, we can then take our dust cover, slide that over. You can apply some dielectric grease and some sealer and stuff in here to help keep the terminals protected, but I usually wait to the very end to do all that. That way if you have to get back in here, it's not a huge mess. But we'll slide the dust cover over and push it into our bracket. And I'm just going to secure it with some self-tapping screws here. We can get our wiring routed up into the engine compartment now. So it just comes out of our plug over through here and essentially just right up kind of behind our headlight where it goes into the engine compartment. In the engine compartment, this is where our wiring comes up, and we're going to need to run it over to the circuit breaker. So we need to find a good spot for it, and right here is about perfect. Nice and close to the battery. Good spot to mount it. So to mount this, I'm going to hold it in place and then use the provided self-tapping screws to get it secured. I went ahead, cut our wire to length here because it's going to get hooked up to the circuit breaker. Strip back the insulation. Then you're going to take the small ring terminal and crimp that on. And we want to hook this one up to the gold post here. You remove the nut. And the gold one is labeled battery, all right? So you might think you want to run the wire from it to the actual battery, but essentially with the motorhome being our battery in a sense, this is how you want to hook it up. So just figured I'd throw that out there. We'll put the nut over it. And then we can grab a 3/8 socket. Snug that down. Then the remaining piece of wire you can build. So one end you're going to crimp on a small ring terminal, other end a big ring terminal. Then obviously the small end is going to go over the silver post there. We'll tighten this down. And this is going to run over to the positive battery terminal. So there's a bunch of posts and stuff here. I really don't want to mess with any of these or take the risk of popping any of these fuses. And so I'm just going to take this nut off, or at least loosen it up. I know sometimes these aren't designed to come completely off. And we'll figure that out here in just a second. If you're turning it and it just ends up stopping, then don't try to force it. So yeah, it's just stopping there. So what we're going to do is take our big ring terminal. I'm going to cut a space into it. And I like to just kind of fold it over on itself a little bit. Something about like that. And we can just work that in around the stud there. And simply tighten this back down. In case you're wondering too, I'm using a 10mm socket to do this. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster battery charge line kit for towed vehicles on our 2022 Chevrolet Colorado.